Right, so amongst the mist and the drama served up to us by the Joshua vs Ngannou fight this weekend, there was another huge fight in the heavyweight division between two of the division's most in-form fighters when Chinese danger man Zhilei Zhang met Joseph Parker. Now, I don't want to blow my own trumpet on this one. No, actually, that's exactly what I want to do because I told you lot, didn't I? I told you that Joseph Parker would have two quicker feet and two quicker hands for Zhilei Zhang. And listen, what do I know, eh? Even a broken clock's right twice a day. But being serious now, what I would say is that it wasn't necessarily the hand or foot speed of Joseph Parker which won him this fight. I think you could even make a valid and weighted argument that this was more of a case of Zhilei Zhang losing the fight rather than Joseph Parker winning the fight. And that might seem really harsh from the outset to hear that. But once we watch back for a few of the key moments, you'll see why I believe that Zhilei Zhang should be absolutely kicking himself that he did not win this fight. I'm massively close to getting his man out of there. Parker picking him off on points. He gets the points victory. Zhang looks shocked there, but I don't know why, because I was watching this one, and if I'm completely honest with you, I said at the end of the fight, Parker's won that. Parker has won that. In the heavyweight division, knockdowns and even knockouts to an extent, but definitely knockdowns don't always mean as much as what they would in the lighter weight divisions because the power factor is emphasized so much more when these guys are 200 plus pounds compared to maybe, the welterweights in the 147 division. If you score a knockdown in those divisions, you've probably hurt your opponent, but just because of the pure weight of the fighters involved, it doesn't hold as much significance and was the better man over the 12 rounds, picking up more rounds on the points card for me. And what was more impressive personally to me than the fact that Joseph Parker got the nod was the fact that he ticked a lot of boxes in this fight. There was still a lot of question marks around Joseph Parker going into this fight, and I'll explain because I don't think anyone can question Parker's bottle, especially when it comes to his willingness to accept hard fights. If you go on names fault, big names fault, he's got one of the best resumes in the heavyweight division. Maybe he hasn't won against all of them, but when you look at Parker's resume, it's ridiculous. Takam, Ruiz, Huey Fury, Anthony Joshua, Dillian White, Junior Farr, Chisora twice, Joe Joyce in his last few, Deontay Wilder and Zhang. Stacked is what that is, my friend. And let's have it right. If every single fighter in the heavyweight division took this sort of path that Joseph Parker has in his career, we would be talking about the best era of heavyweight boxing in decades. But I do think that there's a little bit of a trend in Joseph Parker's fights. You could look at the Anthony Joshua fight, definitely, probably most notably the Dillian White fight, and maybe to an extent the Joe Joyce fight, where we as the boxing public have looked at it and perceived there to be a little bit of a lack of belief from Joseph Parker. But let me make something clear right now. Heart and belief are two very different things. So I'll give you an example, right? I've been in there sparring with some decent level pros, right? Some good level pros. I remember I was sparring once with a WBA Intercontinental World Champion in Tenerife, and he's giving me a pasting, right? Really giving me a pasting. Now, I was still throwing bombs, almost biting down the gum shield, closing the eyes and throwing haymakers at this guy, right? Even though he was fucking me up. That is heart. Heart is one thing. Belief would be me in that moment thinking that I was going to turn that spar on its head and I was going to become the one in control. And realistically, despite the possibility of me landing a lucky shot, I never truly believed that I was going to be able to turn that spar because I was being outclassed. So heart is staying in there. Heart is getting up off the canvas. Heart is biting down on your gum shield. But belief is having that inner strength to think I'm going to turn this fight. So when Parker boxed AJ, he didn't really show a huge amount of belief, in my opinion. After showing huge heart to climb off the canvas against Dillian White, he went missing for quite a few rounds. The belief seemed to desert him, and he almost stumbled upon it in the later rounds when he managed to drop Dillian White. And obviously, we all know by that point, it was too late. The fight had already gone away from him. But in this fight, he showed both heart and belief. And I'll tell you what, a Joseph Parker who believes in himself, fully, truly believes in himself, is a dangerous dangerous man. And it's at this point I have to give credit to the man who is now tasked with guiding Joseph Parker's career, and that man is Andy Lee. And I've spoken a few times on this channel now, haven't I, about the importance that a trainer can play in a fighter's mindset, and this is another prime example, you know. I've actually read Andy Lee's autobiography. Yes, I can read, before you give me that in the comments. And it was actually fascinating when I was reading this book, because he gives a very insightful look into the mind of a fighter, and he's very open with his vulnerabilities that he'd have before fights, and his defensive frailties, almost mental frailties, and anxiety that he'd have before a fight. And I feel like being open and accepting that that can go through your mind, that you can have that sort of vulnerability as a fighter, will obviously allow you to be able to harness that vulnerability you can have as a fighter. And my God, if you know Andy Lee, then you know. If you know anything about his career, then you know. Go and watch some of it back. If Andy Lee wasn't able to harness that self-belief in his career, we wouldn't have seen some of the real memorable moments we did from him. If you've ever watched Andy Lee, you'll know. But if not, go and watch the John Jackson fight and then come back to me, and you'll know why I rate his inner belief so highly. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is I believe that Andy Lee has been able to pass that inner belief and that psychology down to Joseph Parker, and that's why more recently we've seen Joseph Parker come through some of the trickier moments in fights and look like he's shying away a lot less than we have maybe perceived him to in previous fights. So another good performance, another upset victory. Remember, most people were picking Zhang in this one, you know. I can pull up the receipts from the comment section on my last video. I did 2 videos on this subject, and the majority of people were picking Zhang here. So what next for Joseph Parker? Well, we know what's next. We don't need to theorize on that too much, maybe, because there's a rematch clause in the contract, and it very much looks like both men are going to be taking that rematch clause. But while we're speaking about it, why is there a rematch clause? Not only that, but as far as I know, if Parker had lost the fight, he wouldn't have had any grounds to activate a rematch clause. Yet because Zhang lost the fight, there is the need for a rematch. Why? Listen, Zhang's a solid contender, man. He was coming off the back of a few good wins. But these rematch clauses just do my nutting. Like, I'm guessing you lot are going to educate me in the comment section to this. Maybe Zhilei Zhang was ranked very highly in one of the governing bodies. I don't think he was a mandatory for any belt. If he was, knowing that he's boxing on Frank Warren shows before the Saudis came in, it will be the WBO, won't it? Also a belt that Joseph Parker had held in the past, so would have clout with. But why was there a rematch clause on Zhang's side? I've just gone through Joseph Parker's resume. If anyone should have a stronger stance when it comes to the negotiations for this fight, should be Joseph Parker rather than Zhang. So the fact that we're assuming that Zhang was the one in a position to dictate negotiations pretty much just baffles me. I'll tell you what baffles me even more. Zhang's reaction after the decision was read out. Because Zhang thought he was very much hard done by, didn't he? And I get there was 2 knockdowns in the fight, but I don't know, man. Maybe I'm a little bit hard on myself, but I can honestly say that in 10 years of boxing, I've never come out of ring thinking I had done better than I had. Whether that was a fight or whether that was a spar, I've only ever thought I'd done worse than I had. And then when I look back on the footage, I'm like, actually, I've done all right there. I've actually not given myself enough credit than what was deserved. And maybe that's a good mentality for have. I have literally gone back to my corner and asked my coach whether I've just won that round after I've boxed the guy's head off for every single second of the round. So what I'm saying is, surely Zhang, a very well-schooled and well-travelled amateur, could see that he didn't do enough in that fight. And this is why, if you're Zhang, you've got to be so disappointed, man. There was literally a point after that first knockdown when this fight was harder for Zhang to lose than it was to win. And I am not saying Joseph Parker gets off the canvas and you just start windmilling full on Deontay Wilder against Bermane Stiverne style. But what I am saying is, you let your hands go a little bit more than Zhang did in that moment. Because Zhilei Zhang hasn't got a gas tank. Not at world level, he hasn't. For a heavyweight that wants to win world titles, Zhilei Zhang's cardio is not it. Now, a lot of the more casual audience might have only watched a few of Zhilei Zhang's fights. They might have only watched him against Hrgovic and both fights against Joe Joyce, and then come to the conclusion that this man is definitely the best of the rest. But for anyone like me who's watched pretty much every single one of Zhilei Zhang's pro fights, you would see a very, very common trend. And that is that at least once, possibly even twice, in every single fight, Zhilei Zhang gasses out. This man dropped Jerry Forrest 3 times and still only got a draw on the judges' scorecards. And I've watched that fight. I don't think a draw was even that bad a decision. Speaking about bad decisions, many people disagreed with the decision against Hrgović. But I tell you what, even that fight, whether you think Zhang won it by a point or what, after dropping Hrgović early on in that fight, Zhilei Zhang was not able to get him out of there, and he was not able to then be dominant in that fight. And that meant when it went to the judges' scorecards, I think it was a split decision or a majority decision to Hrgović. And as much as some people might not agree with that decision, why did it go there? Because Zhilei Zhang gassed out. He didn't have the engine to be able to compete over the distance. Even in the Joe Joyce fights, Zhilei Zhang slows down massively after having periods of success. And I tell you what, a fight that you're on top in, you're very rarely going to gas out. You know, when you're landing heavy lever on someone, when you're punching someone up, for some reason, that energy bar, you know, like in the computer games, it just stays high for some reason. I don't know whether it's the endorphins getting released in your brain help pump the energy for you, through you and the fitness through you. But if you watch even the Joe Joyce fight, you will see that Zhilei Zhang tires in moments. But because he was so dominant in that fight and he closed the show so well, it didn't jump out at us as a big issue in those 2 fights. I don't think it was an unfair decision at all. I think Parker was a deserved winner. And being that Zhilei Zhang's going to be 41 by the time a potential rematch even takes place, will he be able to change all that much? I mean, he can try and take the opportunity more, maybe gamble and throw a bit more if he manages to drop Joseph Parker in a rematch. But realistically, is he going to be able to get any fitter at the age of 41? I'm not sure. I mean, let's be honest. I think that the adjustments that Zhilei Zhang needs to make would need to be tactical ones rather than technical ones. And if the rematch was to happen next, I'm going to say I think Parker wins again. Now, I'm going to finish this one off by telling you guys a little story that you've all probably witnessed and seen play out in front of your own 2 eyes. But maybe by hearing this, it will open your eyes ever so slightly in the way that you view this current heavyweight landscape. Joseph Parker gets to 24-0, beating some good heavyweights along the way and picking up the WBO world title. He then faces unbeaten at the time Anthony Joshua, and when he loses that fight, he's somewhat disregarded by the boxing public. When he then gets dropped and beaten up for the best part of 11 rounds against Dillian Whyte, heavyweight contender, in his next fight, he is completely written off. He comes back, he rebuilds, he doesn't look sensational, but he gets a winning streak going again, and he builds his way back up to eventually fight another heavyweight danger man at the time, another unbeaten fighter at the time, Joe Joyce. And in that fight, he stopped. And at that point, he once again is completely dismissed, disregarded, and thrown on the heavyweight scrap heap. And now, just 1 year on, he's won his last 5 fights, including upset wins over Deontay Wilder and Zhilei Zhang. The man who stopped Joseph Parker. Heavyweight boxing is a beast like no other. Fighter A can beat Fighter B, but then Fighter B, who's just been beaten by Fighter A, can go and beat someone that beat Fighter A. See where I'm going with this? It's a hard one to follow, but you know what I mean, didn't you? And if you look back closely enough, Joseph Parker's career could have already told you this before Friday night. Joseph Parker, close decision, but he beat Andy Ruiz. Andy Ruiz beat Anthony Joshua, but when Joseph Parker and Anthony Joshua fought, Anthony Joshua beat Joseph Parker. This is how the whole division did work and still does work. If you look at the top heavyweights now, Anthony Joshua, as good as he's looking at the minute, will be beat again. It will probably happen within his next couple of fights. Usyk will be beat. Tyson Fury will be beat. Joseph Parker will also lose again. And if anything to go by on his track record, he'll probably then pick up more wins. That's the way it works. I got a whole lot of hate in my comment section yesterday on the video where I was talking about Anthony Joshua, and everyone was saying, oh, you know, you're a Fury fanboy, you're sticking up for Tyson Fury purely because I made the observation that AJ's win against Ngannou doesn't necessarily mean that he's any better than Tyson Fury is right now. If AJ had have lost to Francis Ngannou, it wouldn't have necessarily meant that Tyson Fury is way better than AJ is right now. The truth is, we're only going to find out who's better between any 2 heavyweights when they get in a ring and fight each other. You, me, or anyone else has no idea, realistically, if we're being honest, what is going to happen. So instead of moaning, instead of disregarding a fighter when they take a loss, let's just sit back and be grateful for the fact that now we're actually seeing these fights take place. Turkey Al Sheikh, the guys over in Saudi, are putting the fights together, and now we're seeing top heavyweights fight other top heavyweights. It's already started, and long may it continue. So at the end of the day, let's just sit back, enjoy the fact we're getting it, and ultimately take happiness that in a few years' time, we're going to have all the answers to all of this when it comes to who is the best heavyweight out there. And until then, let's just enjoy the ride. People, thank you very, very much for making it to the end of another video. I've got to be honest, I absolutely fucking love making these videos for you, man. Obviously, anyone that's followed me from the start of my time on YouTube will know that I came through doing the football content. I do the kickoff every week with Brian, the True Geordie, and the rest of the boys. But boxing's my first love, man. I've boxed for a long time now, coming up, well, 10 years or something since I had my first fight. And obviously it goes under the radar. I'm fighting in a couple of weeks out in America. But I absolutely love banging out the boxing content. And recently, it's really, really picking up. I'm getting such a good response. Listen, people are always going to disagree with me in the comment section. But that's fine. I just appreciate you watching my videos. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know what's next for Joseph Parker. It looks like the rematch clause, but would you rather see him in there with anyone else? There's going to be a few guys, you know, Dillian White, Joe Joyce, Andrew Reese Jr. himself, that could all potentially want rematches now with Joseph Parker. Now that he's gone and done the hard work, and they probably want to ride out off his name a little bit from what he's done. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Please, please, please smash the like on the video. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. That massively helps me out. I will see you all in the next one.